The Spinoff Podcast Network.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. With the price of just about everything going up during inflation, we thought we'd bring our prices down. So to help us, we brought in a reverse auctioneer, which is apparently a thing.
Mint Mobile Unlimited Premium Wireless. How to get 30, 30, bit to get 30, bit to get 20, 20, 20, bit to get 20, 20, bit to get 15, 15, 15, 15, just $15 a month? Sold! Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes. See detail.
This week on The Spinoff, we're releasing our most ambitious pop culture project yet. Are you ready? Introducing the top 100 New Zealand TV shows of the 21st century. Our panel of experts and in-house couch potatoes have pulled together a list of countless shows, whittled them down to the final 100 and set about composing this love letter to a quarter century of local television. The countdown is on to number 1. Read now on thespinoff.co.nz.
Nau mai, hoki mai ki other fold, e mihi ne, ko Duncan Grieve, tōku ingoa. My guest today, Alex Casey.
Kia ora, Duncan. What a treat to be here. The bright lights. Wow.
The big city.
It's great. Yeah.
Yeah.
The motorway. God.
we've got it all. It's not great, but it's out. It's fine. It'll do. Alex is here because it played out last week, but it climaxes tonight in a very special event at Q Theatre. This project, which I've been sort of peripherally involved in, but watching sort of be made and then spill out, and it's filled my cold heart with joy. Can you just tell the listeners what it is you did?
Yes, I like to refer to it mysteriously as the project, like it's Chapel Roan, like talking about a project. The project is the top 100 TV shows, New Zealand TV shows of the. So it's only been a few days and it's already leaving my brain.
There's a few little qualifiers, and if you drop any of them,
it all falls apart. It's the top 100 New Zealand television shows of the 21st century. ... So far, we realised that we were also like, the 21st century hasn't finished. We need to add another few words to this.
But also, there's lots of interesting stuff in that. But there's part of me that thinks that there will obviously be more TV shows to come. But we might have made more in the past 25 years than we'll make in the next 75 just because of the economy, the cultural economy and the way it's trending. Like it feels like a poignant moment to be doing this. Like, what was it that prompted you to grab this thing and do it right now?
Yeah, well, it actually started last year when everyone had after the party fever. And Mad Chapman, our editor, wanted to make the call that it was the best drama New Zealand's ever made. And I wasn't actually in the office for this, but she says there was a little bit of a hubbub when she announced that sort of headline. And so everyone kind of took to the internet to look for, these sort of lists. You see them overseas that pull together the top shows, the top movies. And there wasn't quite anything weighty enough in New Zealand that had ever really been done about TV. So Mad kind of put it, I think, early at the start of the year when we had our big sort of strategy thing for the year, and she said, I think this is kind of something we should look at for pop culture. And so, it had been bubbling for a while, but we actually started kind of work in earnest at the start of August, which was just pulling together the long list, which was in itself a task because it was all over bits and pieces on Wikipedia and New Zealand on Screen, and you realise there's some archiving to do here.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things there's so many things I really like about it. Probably the biggest one was that it felt very much like it came from what the Spinoff has tried to express right through is this high-low culture thing, and that division being artificial. Like I remember very intensely as a sort of a fan and a baby writer growing up and reading, like you said, there's not an identical project hasn't been done here, but there were often lists in like the Herald that would be pegged to some anniversary, and invariably there will be a snide joke about Shortland Street in the intro, and Shortland Street would be nowhere to be found, and there'll be snide jokes about reality TV, and that would not make any serious person's list, any real critics list. And this was filled with kind of format shows, reality shows, and had Shortland Street at number one famously. like, did you have to push that upon people, or did that naturally kind of flow out? Or, you know, like just tell me a bit about how you kind of, because you ruled some things out. You know, we had no New Zealand versions of The Bachelorette and so on. So just talk about that level of thinking.
Yeah. So the long list was, I think it was actually close to almost 300 titles. And so Tara, I have to shout out Tara Ward, who was my tireless partner and kind of overseeing this whole project. There were a lot of other people involved who I'll talk about later. So we had this long list, and just from an eyes point of view, very difficult to deal with. Too many words. So we were like, how are we going to at first just do a kind of cull, a first wave of getting rid of some of the shows that were just never going to make it, you know, but also wiping out genres that are going to be harder for us to kind of qualify in this way. And current affairs was a pretty quick one we decided to take off the table. It felt quite difficult to start comparing all the different news products over time. A lot of them still going. A lot of them we've lost this year. Just didn't feel like the right time to potentially have the spin-off weighing in on like...
Yeah, whether Holmes was better than the project or some kind of thing. Yeah.
And the project would have been disqualified, of course, because as an international format. So that was another easy way to kind of... Honestly, at that point, it was just about easy ways to wipe out a lot. And to me, I don't feel like we lost heaps. I mean... The Traders New Zealand, I think, kind of hurts a little bit. Maybe you could argue a case for the Real Housewives exposing like a particularly hideous vein.
I think that's look. Anyone who's listened to this, some of them will have listened to the Real Pod. So I think we can be honest and say there's a bunch of stuff that we like. New Zealand's Next Top Model would have made the list, I think. And certainly, like, The Bachelor, like, what would have been up for consideration, not potentially all that high, but I think it was the right call. Why did you make the call?
It was because we wanted to just really focus on, like, homegrown ideas, whether that be even something like House of Drag, which really just copied RuPaul's Drag Race homework and just changed, like, nothing. It just made it way more low rent. But yeah, it was just a way of kind of, I guess, rewarding the local thinking and local original ideas was kind of what was motivating that. And we also took off, you know, things like Flight of the Conchords, Starstruck, Our Flag Means Death, shows that have lots of New Zealanders in them. Flight of the Conchords famously turned down by TVNZ, so they went overseas. So that did not make the list. So yeah, those were the big three kind of genres we took out early, and that was a way of whittling down a little bit.
And then who was the crew that you kind of put together to pick the thing?
Yeah. So we put together a survey where we split everything up by decade, and we put that to about, I think, 18 or so spin-off people filled it out. But we also brought in a panel, which was essential because we realized pretty early on there were going to be massive knowledge gaps, you know, age or just general bias, different interests.
There are people who work at the Spinoff now who weren't born when some of these shows, you know, in parts of the 2000s. It's
hurts.
I feel judged.
It's true.
Yeah.
So Diana Wichtel, 36 years at The Listener, writing about television.
Widely considered our best TV critic.
Incredible. And I was so delighted she said she would do it. She was like on deadline for a book, which I believe is coming out soon. And she still squeezed it in. We got Chris Schultz, former Spinoff staffer, also I think about 20 years writing about television in New Zealand for a range of publications. And then kind of filling out the sort of more genre area was Erin Harrington, who's an amazing kind of screen academic in Christchurch.
Her blurbs for certain shows, which, you know, a lot of them you'd be like, I vaguely know that existed. Her level of knowledge and understanding of what was significant about them, those were magic to read.
Yeah, she's like, she has a particular thing for horror as well. And I mean, we can maybe talk about this later, but it was remarkable how many of those horror anthologies and like genre offerings jumped out in the top 100. And then rounding out the list was Dan Taipua, who's been a long-time Spinoff contributor. If anyone's read his writing, you know he just has this like incredible nerd brain for television, and also has those similar sort of genre interests, and also particularly putting them in the context of like Te Ao Māori storytelling. He did this amazing project about like sci-fi and Indigenous storytelling. So I just knew kind of with all their powers combined, hopefully we wouldn't miss too much off the list.
Yeah, and I think because it's 100, it doesn't feel like you missed anything really significant. I'm sure that there'll be heaps of people who worked on shows that didn't make it that will feel differently. The thing that I liked most about it was how, was that sense of it being a kind of a revisionist project in some ways. And I think you saw that particularly in the top 10. When the votes came in and you'd sort of felt like you were comfortable with that list, what was your sort of emotion looking at it? Because you can, was it trepidation, pride, fear? Like, where were you?
Well, the first shape that we got when all the surveys came back and it gave us averages and we had a top 100 I was like, the recency bias here is crazy, and I think there's a thing where perhaps people were trying to be a bit cool with it. There was like, we love eating media lunch, but we're not going to put that in the top 3, of the top 100 shows. That's very sort of Graylin 500 of us.
Well, it's interesting, right? Like, because I think that's a really significant show, and it has aged quite well in some respects, poorly in others. But the quality of the humor, it still feels kind of vivid and relevant now. But it's also just sort of stayed in circulation for a variety of reasons, including the host being in one of the most popular shows around. But I think like the exercise of like smoothing out feels like it just got things in the right place. Like you managed to get over the recency bias without breaking it, I guess is what it feels like. Yeah,
and it was about, I don't know, when you started to see it, it almost felt kind of disrespectful to see some of these legacy shows down at like 40. Like Shortland Street originally was a lot lower. But again, that was also because we didn't quite necessarily know how we were going to be ranking this. We called it top because that felt a little like broader than best. And we decided pretty early on that it was about significance. It wasn't necessarily always just about quality or critical acclaim. We were looking at, cultural representation, ambition, innovation, like legacy, controversy even, if something, the GC made the list, which wasn't initially going to, but I just thought, you look at it and that was the most talked about show of that year, without a doubt. And it had these really interesting like funding wrinkles in it. That has to go in. So it was about talkability as much as it was a 5-star review, in the New York Times as Creamery got. So yeah, that all helped to smooth it out. And then again, it was actually when the writing started to arrive that there was a bit of another shift. Because we were also splitting them up 20 a day, They have to be kind of daily readable products that aren't all shunted in a certain decade, So there was just certain things that informed the reshape.
I can see it with the writing because on some level, writers were making arguments for shows. Not all the time. Sometimes, I wrote a few of the blurbs and you're going off your kind of recollection, your contemporaneous reviews and so on. But you could feel at times that show had just lodged itself with someone, and it might not have been like that widely viewed at the time, but like the fact of it having had that resonance, like I think that it feels like the list kind of worked in that respect, even down to like I'd love to talk about the top 10 itself because it's such a like. It feels like it contains New Zealand for better or worse. Even down to like CTI at number 5, there'd be, as much as like that's become this quite beloved thing, and I feel it feels relatively well understood now that that's much more than it appears. It will still be confronting to people to see it there.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I mean, CTI was always going to be very high. As part of, like you say, this was part of us almost kind of like returning to our roots of like where the spin-off started. It was kind of tied to our birthday as well, 10 years on, coming back to sort of where we began. But CTI, there's just so many moments. I mean, I struggle with writing the blurbs is that each one, particularly for the top 10, could have probably been its own standalone piece, about the significance of it. But once I started writing about CTI, and you're pulling from all these different moments. From every season has this incredible kind of, James Musterpick and Tamaiti last year. These scenes that are just unimaginable on any other show anywhere else in the world. And And, you know, I wrote about Chris Parker's season and that triumphant underdog win coming at, you know, a very dark time for a lot of people in our biggest city. We were, 80 days into that lockdown then? And it's just a reminder, like, it genuinely makes me emotional of how, like, TV, there's just nothing like it to bring us together, and it's so personal, you know. You can feel that in a lot of the writing, I think, that it's like, it's really tied to people's sense of place and time and how they were feeling and where they were. It
also feels like it can, you know, some shows, like, I'm a huge Neighbours at War fan, and I felt like, again, that was top 10, am I right?
That was 14.
14. So you know, very high for a show that a lot of, you know, again, like, traditionally any kind of canon would have been constructed so that Neighbours at War was as far away as possible. But if you think about trying to understand the sort of vernacular language, like the sort of humour, the like views into the interior of just regular New Zealanders' houses, like the way that we relate to one another. There's just so many things that are in that show that you know, you're just not going to get anywhere else. There's absolutely no other path to that.
And Erin Harrington wrote really well, kind of similarly, about New Zealand Today. You know, that she says the kind of ultimate joke of the show is that it pokes fun at all our previous kind of cushy lifestyle programming, including Country Calendar, which did actually outrank New Zealand Today, which is probably ironic. But, you know, that it shows this kind of more gritty, edgy, you know, strange, weird, grubby, you know, parts of the country that you'd otherwise just never see. So, yeah, it was very important to get a bit of a spread there. Country Calendar just had to win. I mean, it's 1966, you know, that's crazy.
Yeah, so there are not many of the shows that just ran continuously for the whole period that it was live, and that didn't represent even half of their time on air. It's interesting talking about New Zealand Today and Eating Media Lunch, because along with Moon TV, Back of the Y, that, you know, there's this whole genre of shows which are parodies of other shows, which also kind of made the cut. And, you know, I guess they just sort of speak to the extent to which, you know, that it doesn't feel like if you were to do a similar list for the US or the UK, while they have similar kind of programming, it wouldn't be so present in the, especially towards the top of any kind of ranking. These are obscure, weird, often kind of not particularly even sort of funded shows that are still really etched into our minds.
Totally. I went back, I wrote about the unauthorized history of New Zealand.
Another one.
Incredible. It's all on YouTube. And I went back and rewatched some of it, and I was like, this show has a lot to answer for. Like, there are things that I'm still not sure if they're real or not, you know, from our history, because I watched it when I was a little bit too young, you know, and it was on a little bit too late, and I was watching it at home. But I was like, I mean, and there are some jokes within a lot of those shows which perhaps haven't aged well, and there is a definite blokiness and male privilege to the production of those shows. But it did make me go, I was like, oh, I wonder, where is that kind of edge gone? You know, where is all that risk gone these days? And then I realized maybe it is like, it's in New Zealand Today, it's in Funny Girls. You know, like Funny Girls actually has some like very bold jokes in it, and I miss that show a lot. And I was happy that it came out where it did. But yeah, there's like a polish now to everything that I think it's harder to come by, like something like Back of the Y.
Does your brand have something important to say through meaningful messaging that reaches the right audience? At The Spinoff, we work closely with our partners to create bespoke campaigns that bring value to both your brand and our audience. If you're interested in learning more about partnering with us, email Beck, that's BEC, @thespinoff.co.nz.
Talofa lover, I'm Madeline Chapman, editor at The Spinoff. If you have the means, consider supporting our high-quality journalism by becoming a Spinoff member. Sign up now at thespinoff.co.nz/donate.
Kia ora, this is Toby Manhire, here to urge you to tune in to Gone by Lunchtime, a podcast with me, Annabelle Lee Mather and Ben Thomas, tackling the world of New Zealand politics, from policy to polling, from scandal to psychodrama. Listen to Gone by Lunchtime, brought to you by the Spinoff Podcast Network, wherever good pods are sold.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Because one of the things that's happened subsequently, and that's why I think it is quite a poignant moment to be making this list, is that historically, New Zealand On Air funded shows that had a particular kind of feel or intent to them, and that was just a portion of what was made. And so you would see, all of your reality shows, all of these kind of weird satirical shows, like, a whole world of television that sat alongside it, and New Zealand On Air was just funded productions were just part of that. And what we've seen over the past few years, but particularly the last year, is that those shows which used to be commercially funded just aren't plausible anymore, to the point where the news, the freaking news just isn't plausible for three. And I think that is some of where some of the edge has gone a little bit, even though it does exist in places. But yeah, was there a sort of, were you conscious when you were making it and when you were having your discussions that the volume of television made and the centrality of television, that shared experience, was, if not coming to an end, it was changing and shrinking almost as you were making it?
Yeah. And I think it's probably where a lot of the emotion comes from in the writing and the reading of it, is it feels so deeply nostalgic. Like even things that were not that long ago, we may never get to that again. And I also wonder now, there's a lot of web series and online sort of streaming first content. Like, does that give us the same experience ever? Because we can just watch it whenever we want. There's something about that, the broadcast terrestrial time.
That's true. And you get at that a little bit with a big streaming show. It does feel like everyone's watching it, even if they're not watching it simultaneously. But, as a person who is really young still, do you, like, in some ways your nostalgia for that is, wouldn't be something that people would necessarily expect from someone like you. And a lot of the argument for, well, not necessarily even the argument, but there's a sort of a sense that YouTube and social media, video on social media, has replaced some aspects of that. Like, do you consume much kind of YouTube and sort of Instagram, TikTok, and do you see local creators there and think, some more, you would have been on TV prior, and some of what I got from television I'm starting to get from here, or do they feel like distinct to you?
My own habits are really shocking, and I don't really want to reveal them. In terms of what I'm seeing on Instagram, it is not local creators. It is stretchy pants that look like office pants, but they're actually pajamas. So I'm not really... You
can find a link to buy those in the show notes.
Yeah.
Alex Casey for 10% off at checkout.
It's about 98 in the rankings, I think. No, I think it's just scary. Like, it feels too overwhelming to even think about, to be honest. I think it's also it's almost like a microcosm of just the freaky world in a way right now, that it's like, there's no one place to turn to for anything. And I actually feel too aged out to even know where the young new creators are. I'm not on TikTok, I don't.
Well, you're also just not naturally served a local thing. So people have tremendous affinity for things, and, a lot of them are watching the same stuff. It's just it can be from anywhere because the algorithm doesn't know borders.
But then after the party kind of gave us that feeling. I felt that because people were genuinely buzzing, and I got so many recommendations, and I felt like I had to catch up to be a part of it in the build up to the finale. And I don't know if I've ever felt that with another New Zealand show, not for a very long time at least, aside from reality TV.
It's interesting, right? And the other thing that's interesting about After the Party for me is, like, when I watched it, it felt like if that had a little, like, static into an HBO logo at the start, I'd have been like, yeah, that makes sense. And I anticipated it traveling to those same kind of communities, but while it has sold well internationally and been tremendously reviewed internationally, it doesn't feel like it's become the kind of massive international buzz show that I expected. I think there are still some territories where it hasn't gone, so that might not be a story that's finished, but I think there was something that was so affecting and vivid about the way that the local context was portrayed in that is part of why it landed as high as it did.
And I do think, I kind of think Mad's call was right, you know. It is the best quality drama, pound for pound, New Zealand's ever made. But it has limitations on its significance, you know, just by the length of the story and the representations within it. It wasn't going to be number one for us. But it got damn close.
It got damn close. But it's also telling that numbers 2 and 1 were each unimaginable without without Short on the Street, it was very hard to imagine Outrageous Fortune. Without Outrageous Fortune, it's impossible to imagine After the Party. And the fact that Robin Malcolm is the through line of those, like you sort of looked at it and you're like, yeah.
Yeah, it makes sense. It's the Robin Malcolm podium. I saw that with a lot of, there was a lot of shows like that. I even wrote it in my Creamery blurb, especially when you look through, we've got the full 100. You can trace those lines between different shows and how these things had to happen for this to happen. And, you know, Creamery couldn't have happened without, you know, The Tribe and Flat 3 and all these like interesting genre shows that were attempted prior to it. And then Roseanne Lang, like cutting her teeth on those web series with those girls. Like I quite like that it also serves as a little bit of a chart of people's careers.
Yeah, it feels like you could do some amazing data viz there. So if anyone's listening and wants to just do that for fun, we would gratefully receive it. In terms of, you know, you spend a lot of time working on this thing and then you put it out and you know that it's going to be, you know, very well read, very well scrutinized, including by some of the people who worked on it. What has the reaction been from the sort of TV maker community to the list since it went out?
There's been really good. It's been nice to see people sharing it. I've seen a lot of people sharing it, just kind of checking off things that they've worked on. Like they're like, I've got 5 today, which is, you know, whatever, nice for you to reflect. But broadly, I think there's been really good feedback. I operate naturally in a state of catastrophe. So I was like, okay, what have we forgotten? Who have I upset? Where's the hate coming from next? And there were a few shows that came up a little bit. Like we didn't really include the sort of enormous Marcus Lush oeuvre of like travel New Zealand shows, which a few people mentioned and did actually come up along the way. And I do reflect on that perhaps that was an oversight. But I think quite early on, we weren't quite sure where we're drawing the lines with documentary and things like that. And I think we kind of loosened the rules a bit late in the game. And so some things made it in, like David Lomas.
Yeah, you did a sort of David Lomas cinematic universe type thing, which was an elegant solve for that. Because some people do just, that's how they make shows. And Nigel Latta was another person who operates like that, who I don't think made the list, but was tremendously popular and impactful during his time. So that, and even like, you know, Mikey Havoc was just renaming his show every year at the top. There was a lot of cuspy kind of late 90s, early 2000s. I had Chris Bishop, the MP, kind of furiously remonstrating about the lack of ICE-TV, which I'm pretty sure just didn't or barely made it to 2000.
Magazine shows were difficult as well. We decided to put Good Morning in at the 11th hour. Again, another one that was like, that was on for a bajillion years. It was such a weird little vision of New Zealand. It had Asta doing the Dying Swan Ballet. But then we didn't put in, you know, the ICE-TV, the U Lives, the U Lates, you know. And actually I think U Live and U Late was where a lot of that kind of edgy experimental stuff was going on. And there's an argument that you probably wouldn't have got a lot of the shows that came after that.
You could do it with like television characters, or like there's so many different versions of it which would naturally capture that. This just wasn't that.
Yeah. No, we have to do it all again. Let's start again.
Okay, so the project is now done, except for one thing.
Except for one thing.
Which you've been out furiously promoting every media
Forgetting
appearance.
to mention on every media platform. We're doing a live event. It's a live podcast at Q Theatre on Halloween. If you're in Auckland, come on down, 7 p.m. Q Theatre, where we are basically...
That's tonight. If you're listening to this, if you're a diligent fold listener who's just waiting for 5 a.m. Thursday, that's tonight.
You've got lots of time to get a costume together.
You don't have to wear a costume.
But it's fun if you do. Some of us will be. And we are basically making our case for the best show that either wasn't on the list or didn't make it high enough. So... featuring, it's hosted by me, but we've got spin-offs, Stuart Soman Lund, Lyric Wairiri Smith, And then we've got television stars, Rhiannon McCall from My Dream Green Home, and Seven Sharp, and Kura Forrester, who features a bajillion times on this list, and I'm very excited to see what she does. So we're all getting up and doing like mini little TEDx talks about our favourite shows. I'm
so curious about what yours is, but I feel like we can't spoil it. You just have to go along. You want it.
Come along.
All right. It's been such a cool project, like to read it and see the care and to just have, it's well documented. It's been talked about on this podcast, the kind of issues that pop culture itself faces, but particular media about pop culture faces. To have something that's so beautifully cared for and thought through and really loves, but not uncritically, the thing that it's talking about. It's been one of my favourite things the Spinoff's ever done. So thank you for doing it, Alex.
Thanks, Duncan. Thank you for taking those long phone calls towards crunch time where I was like, just a vibe. What do you think of this?
Well, I mean, I feel like I was also like, that cannot be. Yeah. And I don't even know if it necessarily came through, but that was reflective of the sort of passions that it contained. And that's what you'll get at the live show, just more of that.
Come along, Q Theatre tonight. Costumes.
What a great time.
Lollies. Maybe.
Te Ai here, recording.
Te Ai here, we'll be there.
Yeah.
It's going to be great.
Thank you for recording this, Te Ai here, at about an hour's notice. And thanks for coming up to do this podcast and for no other reason.
And now I'm going home again.
All right.
Goodbye.
Do you find it hard staying optimistic with all the financial news in the media? I'm Bernard Hickey, and on my podcast, When the Facts Change, I'm here to help you navigate the ever-changing landscape of economics in Aotearoa. So join the conversation every Friday on When the Facts Change, brought to you by the Spinoff Podcast Network in partnership with KiwiBet.
Kia ora, I'm Duncan Grieve, founder of The Spinoff. You can help us keep all of The Spinoff's award-winning journalism free for everybody by becoming a member today at thespinoff.co.nz/donate.
The Spinoff Podcast Network.